I think the last decade has been a real success story when it comes to wind energy. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but we're number one in the world when it comes to the share of our electricity demand met by onshore wind energy. So other countries like Denmark, they have a higher proportion of wind energy in general because they've offshore, and that's something that we haven't yet tapped into. But if you look at what got us to that point, we set a target of 40% early. 2008 we had the target, and we had all the major stakeholders around the table with a plan to deliver on it. You had a really good support scheme in place through Refit, very well signposted. People knew exact deadlines, they knew exactly what they were going to get out of it. You had a grid plan in Grid 25 that at the time looked really futuristic, very much outward looking, very much let's build future capability in for the country. Now, granted, not all of that was delivered, but there was a plan there at the time. And then you had the DS3 program, which showed how you can integrate all of this wind energy on the system. And it's through a combination of all of those and working together with all the major stakeholders. You needed the regulator, you needed the industry, you needed the system operators, you needed the government departments to be able to deliver on it. Everyone pulled together to try and deliver on it. And I know, Conall, to your point earlier, the personal drive that does drive everyone, and some of the inertia that we come up against in the state system and some of the state bodies. I think on a personal level, everyone's so driven towards trying to do the right thing. It's really around trying to break the mold, because what we've done up until this point is not sufficient to get us to where we need to go in the next decade.
It's also very important to note that when, like, you're quoting the amount of onshore wind that we have, that's the resource we have in Ireland. Is we have wind and we have solar, and we often hear about other countries that have higher integration of renewable energy in their electricity supply. But it's really important to differentiate between the sources, right? Because if you look at countries that have large access to large hydro, it's a very different ballgame in terms of integration, and also if they have geothermal as well. So I suppose, Noel, kind of drawing back to your experience in AirGrid previously, can you give us a kind of a picture as to the difference of integrating those sources of renewables versus integrating wind, and why Ireland has really achieved a lot in achieving 40% renewables from wind?
Yeah, so in my previous role, I was the renewable integration lead in AirGrid, and it was my job to try and drive policy changes to get more variable renewables like wind and solar onto the grid. It's very unusual. Ireland is what's called a synchronous system. We're not connected to the likes of Britain or mainland Europe in a way that many other countries in mainland Europe are, where if you've, say, an issue in France, then Spain and Portugal are there, they're synchronized, they can help support it. Ireland's by itself. We, at the time in AirGrid, and still I think are probably one of the best in the world when it comes to managing wind and solar variability on the system. And it really, a lot of my job at the time was almost trying to educate other countries and how they could take what was say developed in Ireland and scale it upwards. I think there's a quote, Nancy Pelosi from the US, she came over and she visited the control center in AirGrid at the time, and she said, we're small enough to be relevant, but large enough to be relevant, but small enough to actually get it done. So, Ireland is often looked at a really good test bed, and that's where the likes of Australia, I know they're one of the more emerging markets when it comes to renewables, but also things like GB and wider Europe is now looking to lessons learned in Ireland to help integrate more wind and solar on the system.